I am thrilled today to have Dr. Saidie Rodriguez with me. She is a physician, speaker, and coach who helps high-achieving women move from performance to presence. She blends evidence-informed tools with the intuitive arts, and she supports accomplished women in cultivating self-trust, authentic expression, and a life that feels as meaningful on the inside as it looks on paper. You are in the right place. Welcome, Sadie.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you in this beautiful community that you're serving and leading and shaping. Thank you. It's a true privilege and honor.
It feels like a real full circle moment for me because the OG listeners on the podcast may remember that we started off really focused on women physicians in particular. And that was the first couple of seasons of episodes. And it was more in the last year and a half that we branched out, and I wanted to extend the conversation to healthcare professionals of all genders and have these larger conversations. But in that transformation, I said along the way, women are still at the heart of this podcast, and women were included in the way our healthcare system was set up. It wasn't designed for the patients or for the women working in it. And so that's maybe an interesting place to start because it kind of intersects with the work that you do and with the new focus of the podcast. So I guess what's your reaction to that? Bridging a little bit of the individual work that you help women do and the realization that the system we work in wasn't designed for us to thrive or for our patients.
Yeah, I think, wow, that's a big question, a humbling question. Hopefully, there's so much space for us to also dream and create with that question while acknowledging everything that you so beautifully did, our human experience, the limitations of anything. Doesn't matter what your identifying roles are. I'm sure all of us rub up in some areas of our lives or not against challenges. And what I love about your space is always that constant invitation to deconstruct it and be a part of the reconstruction process. But like zooming out, I feel this collective pulse. I don't know if you feel it as well, especially I'm in a pediatric field, so it's always predominantly female identifying people. But even beyond that, it's like I feel this pulse within humanity of women taking up more space, speaking up more, creating more. Now, in our generation, how many more women now are at leadership positions? And we get the chance, the opportunity to ask that exact question, Andrea, the way that you asked it. Where is there room in here to create in a different way, to look at it with fresh eyes, to bring a different perspective, to elevate the voices that maybe weren't always elevated? And not only in a gender identifying way, I hope that we can expand that to all identities. But I think, of course, just like the human experience, it is both poles of the pain and the grief, et cetera, of maybe the way that the system limits. But then also, I think the opportunity to say, how do we want to create this? How can we take ownership, agency, and a part of the reconstruction of it? And I really love your framework. And on the heart of it, I'm more on the self-empowerment side than the organizational empowerment side. And I always think about that. People, groups of people, organizations are just a bunch of people at the end of the day. Yeah. But returning to this question about gender, and what I wanted to celebrate was this idea of, I'm going to call it feminine intelligence, but it's not related to a gender. We all have all the human qualities inside of us. And as you're suggesting, in certain environments, it was predominantly influenced by certain human qualities of planning, execution, strategy, quick action. And I'm not saying they're bad. They're great. They save lives. And how also does it fragment us from the wholeness of ourself? And what I really find so beautiful and life-giving is watching these people, men and women alike, rise to leadership positions and say, wait, where are these other qualities coming into play of communication, collaboration, curiosity, presence, as sort of the new leadership superpowers. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of and to watch. And I find a lot of hope in that. And again, it's not like one side is better than the other. I think we need all of it, and different situations call forward different qualities in us to best serve our patients, our colleagues, our loved ones. But that's how I see in medicine and beyond medicine, particularly women, but also men and women rising to this paradigm of reconstructing culture. I don't know if you've seen anything similar.
Absolutely. I definitely think there's a lot more awareness. The sad part is post-COVID, we've actually seen a regression in some of the positive trends that we saw in women's leadership roles expanding. So, I think optimism is we have a lot more women going into medicine. We are still dealing with an issue with getting them up to the next levels. If you're in academics, that it's a big jump from assistant to associate professor. We still don't have enough medical directors. And even weirdly enough, like this is when there's a systems problem, even in the fields of pediatrics and obstetrics and gynecology that are overrepresented with women, we still have more male chairs in those fields. That's when you go, okay, there's a problem here. Even the specialties that have more women, but at least we're talking about it. I just think it's such a weird time because it's 2026. We've made huge leaps. And yet, on a societal level, there's been like these weird pockets of regression. Like, even if you look at like the trad wife movement, I don't think we've ever talked about it on the podcast. Yeah, I still get people that sometimes say, what is a trad wife? But it's essentially the celebration of the traditional role, which again, I have no problem with any role anybody of any gender wants to have if that's what you want to do. It's about having choice and also having the ability, that phrase, is it Walt Whitman, I contain multitudes, that we can contain multitudes so that you can really celebrate certain roles that you have in your personal or home life and want to have a leadership role and presence in your professional space. So I don't know if any of that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely does. And I think you're just returning it to like, there can be a diversity represented as long as the person gets to choose was the most important way. Can we remove the division amongst us? But I think it's okay. This all sounds beautiful on a podcast. And how do we make it practical? And I think one of your examples I'm still thinking of in a previous discussion that we had was even like simple things like how can we re-look at training? How can we allow top down also there to be permission for flexibility or for different expressions of people's life to be supported? Like, where did these things even come from? We can start with the 5 whys, just even with where we are. How come there's that? And how come there's that? And how come there's that? And who gets to make these decisions? And how can we start to not just have the conversation, but start with real belief that we can change things, that we have the ability. I belong in this room where this conversation is happening. Not only do I belong here to have this, I think I can do something about it. And I don't know how long it will take me. It might take me my whole career. It might go past my lifetime. This might be for my grandchildren. But I believe that me troubleshooting and talking to this person and networking over here, and if this is my passion, I can be a part of that in change, whether it's visible or invisible. And I think that is sometimes I find also the missing piece. It's okay to talk about, it's accepted to talk about. But then what? What do we do with the words and the conversations? How can we believe that we are the ones to be a part of that change and to question things? And maybe I don't want to be a program director, but I believe that I can sit with you and have a cup of coffee and my words might matter. And let me check in with you next quarter and the next year. You know what I mean? We don't have to be the ones to control it all, but how can we believe that we are all part of this beautiful ecosystem? And when we show up with our gifts, with our passions, that we actually don't have to solve every problem, because there is this incredible woman, Andrea Austin, on the other side. And I know I trust her 100%. She's going to take care of it. don't have to now be the program director to do it, but I can talk to her and I can believe that I matter in that conversation, even though ultimately she's the one who signs the paper.
Yeah. And I think going back to, even though we're living in this wild moment in human history, what does give me hope and what is definitely different than when I started in residency 15 years ago, so 10 years since I graduated, 15 since I started in residency, is we have more allies of all genders. I had a great guest on the podcast, Scott Passachow, and he talked about, as a male resident, it angered him that the male residents weren't allowed to have time off to be dads. And he got involved in organized medicine to get the policy changed, I think at the ACGME level. It was like a huge thing that he did. And so that's different, right? It's not just the women talking about this now. And that's the conversation I'm trying to move forward. Is this isn't about what's good for women. It's
Right.
about what's good for humans. We've created some divisions, and you can even see some of the anger that's happening at the societal level, that men are actually suffering right now and regressing. When you look at
Right.
men graduating from college, dating, all these other markers of male well-being, they're going down. And when they go down, they start to feel even more anger and lash out at women. And so
Yeah.
instead of more division, we need to look at what's good for humans. How would
Right.
humans thrive? Babies do well when there's two loving parents involved. That's the way it was
Yeah.
supposed to be, of whatever gender. So how do we support both parents being present, not just
Yeah.
giving moms time off?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. Isn't it Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Wasn't one of her big first cases for fighting for a man's similar, like his childcare rights?
Yeah. So that's fascinating and such a good reminder. But yeah, I do think it's really hopeful that we are seeing a lot of positive ally behavior. And I think especially in medicine, I can't say that across the board in all industries right now, but I feel very supported by my male colleagues, at least where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's first major gender discrimination case was for a male caregiver who was denied a tax deduction for caring for his mom because he was unmarried. Like, such a beautiful point in your case that we're all just humans. And if we can support this group and that group and all of the groups to be as equitable as we can, it's good for all of us. A rising tide lifts all boats. So how can we remove the separation and use it as an invitation to be each other's allies?
Yeah. As I alluded to when we started recording, is we go off script early and often, I like to say, with this podcast. Hopefully it keeps it fresh for the listeners. But let's back up. And the question I usually start with is, how and when did you first know that you were a change maker?
Ooh, that is such a beautiful question. And I truly hope every listener asks themselves that. And I bet, gosh, if we spent time, we probably could find multiple cycles of that
Right.
knowingness. The one that most easily comes to mind is the most recent example. I'm going to sit on that one after this conversation's over, because I think that's a gorgeous question for all humans. I think when in my recent era of returning to self and to authenticity, it was when I was courageous enough, might not be the right word, as it came from pain and fear and loss of self. But when the pain of that was great enough to say, ooh, something's got to change. Maybe it should be this job. Maybe it should be this situation. And this is my origin stories of stumbling onto coaching. And thankfully, because of the beautiful cognitive emotional tools that it offered me, I was able to return back to freedom and empowerment and passion and joy. And I stay very much every day a full-time physician. But the reason I'm pausing here is because I think so often when we think of change, we think of visible, measurable, external to me, and influencing someone else, a person, place, a resource, a good, something. But I think that when I define change that way, it's easy for me to, oh, how can I guarantee it? Okay, do I need to be a little bit more shape-shifted over here? Do I need to give a little bit over there? And all in all, the sequelae of that was disconnection from self. And I realized that the greatest change can be internal, can be invisible, can be not measurable. And yeah, I think that moment of being in pain enough, scared enough, I guess courageous enough to say that I need to return to self in the current era would be my answer of being a change maker in my own life for me, not because anyone else, not because of anything else, or trying to secure a patient outcome or a team thing or an accolade or a title, but just for my own life.
I love that. And it's a story that resonates deeply with me. It mirrors where I was in 2021, ready to leave medicine. And I was really at this point of it's either medicine or me. One of these things has changed or needs to change, and I don't know which one it is. So I'm going to take some time to really explore that, and then found coaching as well. I still think coaching has an element of stigma around it, and the listeners of this podcast hopefully feel more comfortable with it. If you had to pick one thing that you learned from coaching, or why you became a coach, or why you feel so passionate about more people exploring coaching, what is it for you?
Truly, I think that a couple of key things that have changed my life have been like understanding agency. Like I used to just feel so at the whim of life and circumstances. Therefore, that's why I would try to control them so tightly or give pieces of away myself to try to trade out like transaction with life to try to guarantee something. And I think that entails the second part of the freedom of it, which is really this like non-judgment view of life, of the wholeness of life, and really removing the labels of the human experience and embracing all of it as gorgeous, this miracle that we get to live. But to get from A to B took many years of practicing non-judgment, practicing being aware of my thoughts, inviting myself into a relationship of myself of why do I think this way? Why do I value being happy or at peace more than being in grief? How can I challenge that? And really taking on these maybe tools as like invitations or philosophies to get to know myself better and to return in every moment to that space where then I can create consciously, deliberately, intentionally in a way that feels amazing to me, that increases my capacity to love and to lead and to serve and to create and just feels more lighthearted. I don't even know if I answered your question, but I think the agency and like the acceptance, maybe it's like radical acceptance, maybe, oh, I can stop fighting myself and fighting the world. And okay, now I can move because I've stopped resisting in the quicksand. That's making me sink even more.
Yeah, it totally resonates. My coach, Cherie Johnson, her thing that she says all the time is reality wins every time.
That's so
It's
good.
so simple. It's so simple, but you think about how much mental energy, like during the pandemic, like I want more people to get vaccinated. I want this person to wear a mask or whatever it is. And it was so much wasted energy. People are going to people.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I have no agency. It means I developed this practice during the pandemic where I would stand out someone's door and I would say, if they were conscious and could follow commands, could you please put your mask on? Hi, it's Dr. Austin. I'd like to come in and help you. Could you please put your mask on? And 100% compliance. And it was just a matter of, instead of just being pissed off and walking into the room being like, this won't put their mask on.
Yeah.
Which was the story I was telling myself.
Right.
I suddenly was like, I'm going to say her name again, Sheeta Shaffi, internal boundary of, I don't feel safe coming into this room without the person having their mask on. I'm going to stay outside and respectfully ask that they do it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, everyone did.
Yeah.
So I just invite the listener to think about that. What in your life are you holding on to that nobody knows? Like we all think everyone's walking around, like reading our minds and anticipating our needs. 99.9% of people are not. And you're going to have to verbalize what is okay for you and what is not.
Yeah, yeah. Like what I also hear in your example and makes me think of when I'm attached to the outcomes, I react. When I'm attached to the relationship, I respond. So like in your example, it's like, oh, this is unfair. Why aren't people vaccinated? Why do I have to come to work? It's like these outcomes that I wish I could change. And like, there's no human there. Of course, I'm going to want to react. But when it's like, I care about my health, I care about what I'm bringing back home to my family. I care that this patient knows that you even said my name. Hi, I'm Dr. Austin. I care that they know why I'm making this request of them, right? It brings it back to the connection, back to the human on the other end. Like how much more capacity does that allow us to create that space from which we can intentionally respond? And I feel like one of the first aha moments I had when I started coaching in academia was like, oh my gosh, all of these stories, all of these situations, all these things, I think they're really just leading us back to one simple thing, which is this is all just a relationship with ourselves. This is all just relational. Life is relational. Our relationship to emotions, our relationship to the circumstance, our relationship to our thought, our relationship to ourself, our relationship to our identities, our relationship to our roles. And like even in that example, it just goes back to your relationship with your patient, with your purpose, with yourself, with your loved ones. And how can we just re-anchor ourselves back to what matters most, I think, is that relational aspect, no matter how we encounter it. A patient during COVID or at a board meeting, whether that's your personal board meeting, which I learned from you, or an actual board meeting at whatever, work, school, it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's what I was thinking of when you were telling your story.
Yeah, there's something from your bio I want to go back to. So you mentioned authentic expression, and I think authenticity is one of those words we hear all the time. And authenticity is so important to me. And for me, it was one of those things that once I started becoming a more authentic version of myself, I felt better at work. And that sounds very simple, duh, but I really had forsaken myself and had gotten so comfortable masking that I didn't really understand the power of authenticity. So, could you give some practical examples of how to channel authenticity? And perhaps it's some of the culture of medicine, the indoctrination that happens, and it's similar to the military, right? We have uniforms, we have these white coats, we have a lot of things that ask us to conform. So, what's some of the patterns that you've seen in clients, and how can people begin to unpack their authenticity in a way that is still caring? I think sometimes authenticity becomes like, to be my authentic self, I have to be selfish. So, how do you navigate that line of channeling true authenticity and maintaining that relational component as well?
Yeah. Oh gosh, this conversation could go in so many directions because I'm sure for each person who has a challenge with being vulnerable and showing themselves, I'm sure there would be so many different answers. So these are the ones that come to mind, just a couple to touch on. I want to talk about self-trust. I want to talk about our brain. And I want to talk about one more that escaped me. Maybe it'll come back. I think the interesting place to start is, why do we have a hard time being ourselves? What is the benefit of conformity, especially in a high stakes environment where you want to do the best for your patients or for your colleagues? And if you see that there's an evidence-based way, a standardized way, a protocolized way, oh my gosh, I would do anything to keep that baby in front of me safe, to keep that family in front of me well served, to help my colleagues. I think it's just something we have to be aware of and conscious of. I don't think it's always like a good or a bad thing. And there's a lot of ways when we are standardized, we help efficiencies and we minimize patient harm, et cetera. And I think that when it comes to the self, then how do I express myself? Maybe I can still on the outside do these best practices, standardized ways. But where now is there a little bit of room within this safety, this container, this structure, to then have a little bit of ease or flow or dynamic, like the way that I approach it or my style or whatever is different, of connecting with this patient, of doing this procedure. And I think that takes honestly like a lot of self-trust to go back to in the beginning. because it does feel a lot safer to belong, to know that other people aren't going to judge you. And if they do judge you, at least like you're doing it as quote unquote as you can. And like you're mitigating that social threat, which is so real. And I think that is a multidimensional relationship with ourself, with our mind, with our thoughts, and with our, however you want to put it, your energetic being, your spirit, your gut, like the invisible part of you. I think in that way, I would say where I want to bring in the mind, one of the practical examples that I used early on, and I still do, is when the inner critic starts to come and no, don't be too weird. Like speaking of authenticity ourselves, or in your example, selfish or whatever, because the judgments will always come. And I used to think, gosh, I have spent years studying this coaching stuff. Shouldn't I know better? It's like, shouldn't I be able to like Jedi mind trick myself by now? Shouldn't I be able to not react? Shouldn't I not have an inner critic? And there was one point that I finally was just like surrendered to it all and was like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm making this more difficult than it is. You just love me, brain. Oh, this is so simple. You want to keep me alive. Of course, you want me to belong and be safe and be in the cave and be in the tribe. And when it goes off, now it's no longer a judgment of it going off. I just tell it, I love you too. Or you could say whatever you want to it, but it's like a toddler running around, a tantrum, trying to get our attention. And they're running around with a knife. Like, we got to take the knife away, put them in their boundaries, give them a big hug, tell them I love them, but like not judge them for being a toddler who needs attention and supervision. And that was one part of the equation that helped me in building some capacity to be more myself. Was just anytime my mind started overthinking it, started criticizing me for it, if I could notice it, I could just tell it, I love you too. And that helped me create the space, break that limbic cycle loop of emotion reaction. And then emotionally, going back to the relationship of self and expanding our capacity to feel all the feelings was like every time you felt like people were laughing at me for being too bubbly or whatever it was, for being too whatever I had just shown of myself, for being vulnerable, because that feels scary. Any of those emotions, for feeling ashamed, embarrassed, anything that it is, practicing that relationship to them of processing it, allowing the wave to pass, recentering myself. And even there was sometimes earlier on where I would have to give myself a cue and I would have to say, it's okay for to be wrong about you. And that helped me come back to myself and have my back through it. And you know what? If you're going to have this whole human experience anyways, why are you also giving up like the things that make you sparkly and joyful? You can never escape all the quote unquote, right? The bad stuff, quote unquote, because it's not actually bad. That's part of again, back up to our beliefs and challenging our beliefs. But so it was like a double loss. Okay, I'm going to not be me, but I'm also still going to suffer. I might as well just be me and suffer. So that takes a lot of emotional capacity. And then in whatever other aspect you want to call it, but that thing about each one of us that kind of radiates through, that shines through, I had dimmed that for some time, trying to shape shift my way into safety, not just for me, but for my patients, to make sure I was looking like, talking like everyone else, that I didn't want to harm anybody. And that's the last part I wanted to bring in, is that connection to self. And I think that's where some time and space, and I think you practice this as well away from medicine, and all of the ways that we identify ourselves are beautiful, but also limit us as mom, provider, daughter, sister, physician. Some of this you can do as a practical exercise. Who am I? Why am I here? What did I come to experience this lifetime? And not attaching it to a label, but instead a word. Maybe mine was to love. Like when I dug down deep, it was to be an untethered force of love. That's just what I wanted to experience in this lifetime. And I would say in the past year, I continue to do the practice to create. And I think doing exercises like that help you explore with playful curiosity. Who do I want to be? How do I want to try this on? How do I want to create in this season, knowing that my seasons will change, knowing that I can always redecide, knowing that it's not permanent, but allowing that inner exploration, because I think that is what ends up flavoring the waters. But you got to have the emotional regulation and the beliefs to support the capacity to show up that way, right? And to flavor the water that way with your own heart, your own spirit of things. And that's what people see on the end as a result. But it takes all that inner game to be able to discover it, to explore it, to play with it, to hold it, and then to finally express it. And so it's an ongoing journey. I hope that until my last breath, I continue to be on that journey of uncovering more layers and creating more layers and completing certain layers if that's what I choose without judgment. Yeah, that was a very long answer.
There's so much wonderful stuff in there. And you think back to what are the things that you learned in your life? There was a before and then there was an after. And I think that phrase of let people be wrong about you. And that was such a big transition for me. And I think it happens for people at different points in their life. For me, it was a late 30s thing that it is okay for somebody to be wrong about you. When you get that, for us as emergency doctors, the email, the sepsis email, that it's a sepsis fallout, and you get it and you're like, I did the right thing for the patient. They really didn't need 30 ml per kg bolus. And this person that sent this email thinks maybe I'm a bad doctor because I didn't, quote, do this. It's okay for somebody to be wrong about you. And sure, maybe you have to reply to the email. Maybe you have to amend your chart. And maybe there's no good outcome. Maybe it truly is just a fallout. And that was such a big moment for me that I don't have to respond to everything. I don't have to manage everyone's thoughts about, I literally can't manage their thoughts. Now, sure, there are certain things that I could do that influence, but I can't change anyone's thoughts about me. And my goodness, what a relief. I have enough jobs than managing what people think about me.
It's so true. And I think too, and like another belief to play with in that meaning making, but instead of meaning making about them, meaning making about ourselves, is anytime that someone, let's say, would judge you or laugh at me or something, I would smile to myself and I would say, I must be doing it right. Meaning, if you stand for something, you're going to be polarizing. So there's going to be people who love you and think you have the answer and will follow you. And then there's going to be people who have the exact opposite experience and maybe you even trigger them. And what an interesting thing with no curiosity other than to say, I must be standing for something. Maybe in this example, it's our authentic expression, whether that's a certain way that I talk to patients, whether that's a certain way that I run my team, whether that's a certain way that I come to patient management conference and challenge the system. And everyone knows, oh gosh, she always does it like that. But also there's signal there. There's signal that you are standing for something, that you're doing something. So you must be doing it. I don't want to say again, because there's labels of right and wrong, but we'll use whatever language you want. But as another opportunity for our meaning making to do it in a way that supports us. Oh, I must have been myself today if I elicited a reaction, whether it's quote unquote good or bad. But again, that goes back to having your own back through it and not wanting to just be so plain and vanilla that you never get a reaction. And that's okay too. And I don't want for people to think that they have to always be polarizing. Of course, if you are in a season where it's volatile and you need just to be centered and safe and shut parts off of you off for a season so you can get through and you can heal and all of that, as long as it's from what you want, not because you believe you have to.
I love that. And for many of the listeners, I think I have more mid-career listeners, but really this can happen at any phase of your career. The second you begin to have some power, and maybe that comes from a title, maybe it comes through influence, but especially for people that are beginning to ascend, and it's a lot of the people listening here that are change makers, you have to start to ask yourself, what's the point? I get to swear on this podcast.
Yes.
What's the point? What's the
Yes.
point of having the title of program director, or medical director, or chair, or this or that, if you aren't authentic and you don't stand for something? And probably one of the most polarizing women of all time is Hillary Clinton. And there's this great book that was written by her communications director. I think it's called Dear Madam President. And she wrote it to the next woman who runs for president, which it was written before Kamala ran. It's a must read for, I think, all women. And one of the phrases in that book that they used during Hillary's campaign was draw fire and move forward. And I sometimes think of that. There are times where I know I'm going to have to stir up some stuff, and it's going to be a draw fire, move forward situation. And not everyone's going to be happy at the end. And I think about it a lot in the emergency department, but really any clinical environment is complex as hell right now.
Right.
Everything is so complex. So on any given day, is everyone happy at the end of it? Is the patient, is the family, is the nurse, is the 10 different consultants that have chimed in, is everyone in an equipoise at every moment? No.
That's so true.
No. So once you start to unlock that self-trust, it's so amazing. And not that I have it every day, but the days that you actually have it and you can actually be like, I have compassion that this person is suffering right now and they're upset with me or with the situation. And I trust myself that I did the best that I could here. And that I'm still trying to maintain this relationship in whatever capacity we can.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many little things I want to say to that, because it's true. In the pursuit of the greater, the system, the team, whatever, it's true. Sometimes I think we believe that we all have to be the same. Nature is so diverse. We don't need all the same plants. A symphony has so many different instruments. It's not, we need that diversity. We need that tension. We need the conflict, even. The conflict is required, but the combat might be optional. How do we approach the conflict with curiosity and with connection and with everything that we're returning to, with the self-trust, with being okay in ourselves enough that we can see the other person more clearly? We wouldn't want the nature to be all the same species. We need the cycles and the degradation, and sometimes we need to burn the soil to re-nurture it. And same with the symphony, like the silence in the music and all of the different notes. It's not that we all have to be the same note all the same time. That would be so flat. No one would find art in that. It wouldn't move you. You wouldn't create anything with it. And so I think similarly, when we get in these relational environments with our patients, with our teams, with our hospital systems, I think sometimes we want to immediately judge that because someone is polarizing, that's a bad thing or that's destructive. But it's just, everything is simply a container through which to know ourselves, through which to relate to each other and our life. And what a beautiful opportunity then really to practice everything that you teach: curiosity and questioning and intentionality and self-trust and self-love. Because I will say the one most surprising gift that when I started practicing curiosity to myself, I never thought that I would be more curious with the person in front of me. I already thought I was a kind person, a loving person, but how much did it remove the comparison, the competition, the need to be right? I didn't need to be right. I could be free. I could be connected. I could be creative. I could celebrate the person in front of me without believing that it took away something from me. Yes, promote this person to director. Yes, let's celebrate this publication that this person did, even though my paper got rejected 3 times, because it allows that capacity when we continue to nurture everything that you teach in this space of cognitive emotional regulation and self-love and self-worth. Oh my gosh, yes, the surgeon can have a completely different plan for my patient, and I don't have to make him or her the villain. There doesn't have to be, like, the conflict can be helpful. Yes.
It brings me back. So generative conflict, that can be a word people can take back. Can you add that to your conflict? The next time you're having this tug of war, it feels like that with a consultant, that maybe this is going to be generative. Maybe we're going to get to the third great idea because of our 2 what seem diametrically opposed ideas right now.
That's it. Yeah. And authenticity is the heart of all of that, right? Because I have to be able to stand for something. I have to be able to come to you and have of myself enough that I can say, it's okay if this person judges me as a bad person or they don't think I know what I'm doing or whatever. But I have purpose in front of me. I have something greater than my ego and my fear that can carry the fear. It's not that we're trying to eliminate the fear. It's just that we don't want the fear to rule, right? We want this authentic expression, our creativity, our mind, our expression to be a part of the generative conflict. That's a really hard thing to do, to show up that way. But I really believe that the whole process is generative, because the more that Andrea talks to me as herself, the more I have permission to be myself too. I can feel it on the other side, that she can hold herself. I don't have to placate her. I don't have to agree with her so that she'll be okay and hold this conversation. No, honey, she can handle her own. So guess what? I can show up with all my fire because she's coming with hers and she can hold hers. And the two flames make a bonfire now, or cooking. So it's like you had said that statement earlier, selfish. And I wanted to make sure I could come back to it, because I think that is the most limited way that we can look at it. Is it possible that because you're allowing yourself that gift of being vulnerable, of being seen, of stretching your capacity, of speaking your truth, that you can't ultimately harm me? And I'm going to put that in air quotes. I'm sure that could be a whole nother episode and you could go back to all the cognitive emotional tools, right? But if I have my own agency and you have yours, and I have my emotional regulation and you have yours, is it possible that it is maybe you are full of self in a radiant way, in a way that allows me to be full of self? And now we got something incredible going on in between us in a way that serves not just me and my ability to show up, but now it's serving the person in front of me. Now it's serving this problem in front of me. Now it's serving the system that we got to fix, or the education system that we are both a part of. And I know we're coming on time. I just wanted to bring that in because I think in the last couple of years, when I've really allowed myself to just go for it and just be weird and be laughed at and be whatever, yes, immediately it gave me the freedom and permission. But I was so surprised later, a year or 2 years later, you get your annual review and the person sits you down like, oh, did you know people have now turned you into a phrase? What would Sadie do in this situation, or whatever? And oh my gosh, I wasn't trying to influence anyone. I wasn't trying to change the culture to be more compassionate or to be more loving or to be more whatever. But man, I guess how can you not, when you see someone in front of you, be permission to be themselves? Of course, it radiates in the field around them. Of course, we are co-creating this ecosystem, and you and your participation or your lack thereof contributes. So if you can't do it for you, can you do it for your colleague, for your patient, for your family, for someone else? They need you to be you, just as you are. Not the future you, like this right now, the messy. We judge it also that it has to look a certain way and be a certain way. The women who changed my life back in that dark night of the soul, 2019, 2020 era, they had no idea they were changing it. They were just being themselves. And in their living example of it, it's not like they sat me down and they mentored me. It's not like they coached me. It's not like they taught me, but I watched them day in and day out advocate like fire, one of them. The other one, be so dedicated to clinical excellence and research. Another one who was just joyful in the midst of a stressful ICU unit. And they just being themselves, they were my beacons of light. And I share that story so much over and over. I return to it because it's a reminder that no matter what you judge, that your life isn't perfect or you haven't done it right, said it right, someone is watching you. And you are hope to someone. And you represent something for someone that they wish they could be a little bit closer to, or you remind them of something in you, and you remind them of something that they want to do or to be, and to be proud of exactly where you are. Yes, I want to grow and I want to be better and I want to reach. And I am right here and I'm here for it with all of it. The parts you're going to love and the parts you're going to hate. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure I could touch on that message for someone who might need to hear that.
I love that. That is so beautiful. And I appreciate you sharing your sunshine. And I say that purposefully because you are host of the Soul Shine podcast. And I was a guest on your podcast. So if you're listening to this conversation, I don't know which order they're going to come out. We haven't coordinated. But look over at Dr. Rodriguez's podcast as well. And we could all use some more shine in our life. So check that out. And for our listeners that want to connect with you, how can they find you? What do you offer? Because I know there's going to be people out there that identify with being accomplished women needing more self-trust and authenticity.
Yes. Thank you. It would be an honor to walk with anyone. I have a little gift you can start with. It's at www.soulshine.global/podcast gift, all one word. And it's just a little self-trust activation, little 10 minutes where we literally look at ourselves like a symphony and we invite all of the different notes and silence and things within, and we just look at it as information. So that's a great place to start. And yeah, otherwise I work with people either in private or in a group container that goes through a certain theme. The one that's coming up, interestingly, is all about authentic expression and how to have that journey with yourself, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with the message, your relationship with impact. And it's just a beautiful relational container and journey. If they want to join me there, they can find all the details on my website, www.soulshine.global.
I love it. It's been a joy getting to know you. And I'm really thankful that the physician coach community has brought us together. And I'm looking forward to being at the summit this fall. Will you be there by chance?
Yes, I will be there with you.
Oh, that's great. So if you're a coach or you're coaching curious, I hope you'll consider joining us. Let's see, we'll be in Oregon outside of Portland at this amazing retreat experience. I think it's this first weekend in November. So we'll put a link in the show notes and you can meet me and Sadie and a bunch of other wonderful coaches. And I don't think you have to be a coach. So if you're just curious about this community and want to be more open to self-discovery, and maybe you're thinking about getting your coach certification or not, it's just going to be a really cool space with a lot of great people. So with that, thank you, Changemaker community. Continue, I think, being you. It's such a great message that we had from today's episode. The healthcare community needs the authentic version of you showing up as the change maker and champion in your teams and systems. So with that, we'll see you on the next episode of Heartline.